Well, thank you for joining us. There's been a lot of discussion about the geopolitical relations between the US and China of late, but not so much conversation about the business side and the economic side. How do you size up the business and economic relationship between the US and China now?
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for having me. China and the United States are two biggest economies. Our interests are so intertwined. Two countries are interdependent. Over the past decades, since the establishment of diplomatic relations between our two countries, our trade and business relations have made remarkable achievements, benefiting the two countries and benefiting the world. We are natural partners because our economies are highly complementary. Last year, the COVID has caused great difficulties to world economy, but China-US trade performed well. Just give you a few figures. On bilateral trade, the US-China bilateral trade reached a record high of $750 billion US. China's non-financial direct investment in the United States has surpassed $70 billion US. And so far, more than 70,000 American companies investing in China. 97 of them are making profits. Right? So look at these figures, they are good. So we are trying to buy more. According to statistics of US-China Business Council, last year, China's import from the United States increased by 21%. This is another record high year. So we are very optimistic about the potentials and opportunities between our two countries. But at the same time, we are mindful of the more difficulties and the challenges in our trade and business relations. These uncertainties and instabilities are mainly from the US side. The Section 301 tariffs imposed by Trump administration are still going on, and the United States is now defining China-US relations as intense competition. Under such circumstances, business and trade are being politicized. So Chinese companies more and more are being restricted and even surpassed by the overstretching of the concept of national security and by the false claiming of forced labor in Xinjiang. So now we have more difficulties and uncertainties. So we hope that the United States should stop politicizing our business cooperation and stop using trade as a tool so that we could provide more stability and predictability to investors. Because if this situation goes from bad to worse, it is in nobody's interest. Looking around, we have a COVID rampant in the world, and we have the Ukraine crisis in Europe. They caused great difficulties to world economy, and more countries are suffering from energy and food shortages, and global supply chain are being disrupted badly. So China and the United States, as two big countries, as the two largest world economies, they need to coordinate and collaborate and to take a leading role to make the world economy recover as soon as possible. But it needs a good environment.
So let's zero in, if we could, on investment. Chinese investment used to be a lot bigger not too long ago than it is today. We do see successful companies like Fuyao, Boli is in the Midwest, and there are some Chinese pharmaceutical companies that have also been investing in that area. What, beyond the general environment that you just mentioned, do you think could be done to get investment back up to where it was, or even higher?
Well, over the past decades, we have seen many Chinese companies investing in the United States. So they are good for American consumers, they are good for American families. But as you have noticed, in the recent years, the Chinese investors, they are facing more difficulties and challenges, mainly because of two viruses. The first is COVID. The pandemic has caused great difficulties to the business operation of Chinese companies in the United States. According to a survey conducted by the Chinese Chamber of Commerce in the United States, 35% of the Chinese companies being asked replied that they are seriously impacted by the pandemic. And secondly, and most importantly, is the political virus. As I mentioned earlier, trade and business are being politicized in the United States. The so-called national security concept are being abused and overstretched. You know how many Chinese companies are being sanctioned or restricted? More than 1,000. So they are put on the various list of entities and the sanctions, and the lists are getting longer and longer, and day by day. Take telecommunication business, for example. A number of Chinese telecommunication companies, they have been deprived of their licenses operating in the United States.
You mentioned that U.S. exports to China have increased. Recently you were out in the Midwest and had an interesting time. I was reading some of the reports from your trip. What is your sense of the folks that you talked to in that part of the U.S. about the outlook for their business with China?
Well, most recently, I visited the heartline of the United States. The 3 states I visited, Illinois, Iowa, and Minnesota. And during the whole visit, I met many business people, and I went to the farmland and went to factory workshops, and I talked to not only the CEOs but farmers and the workers. I have a very strong feeling that the sound and healthy U.S. trade and economic relations are in the fundamental interest of our two peoples. You know. Take agriculture, for example. Last year, China's import of U.S. agricultural products increased by remarkable 68% over the previous years, you know, making the volume, you know, totaled at more than $38 billion US dollars. This is the bulk in the share of the U.S. export to China. So we had a senior level agricultural dialogue held in Iowa. It was well attended by central and the local governments and by business agricultural associations and by individuals. The repercussion was overwhelming. You know, during the symposium, two big deals were announced. You know, two Chinese companies announced to buy more American agricultural products. So American farmers, they told me, so their lives very much depend on their export to China. And I was very impressive with their way to do modern agriculture. You know, they are hardworking, but hardworking in modern agriculture is not enough. It involves technology and knowledge-based. So I was very impressive with, you know, the farmers. They're using modern, advanced technology to capture and store carbon under their farms, right? So they are very climate aware. And I was also very impressed with the modernization and automation of the American agriculture. So I said to people in Iowa that, you know, our agricultural cooperation shouldn't be limited to only you sell more and I buy more. You know, should expand to the area of sustainable agriculture, and how you know, two countries can learn from each other and help each other to achieve the green and the low carbon transformation in agriculture.
Yeah. So although U.S. exports, increased last year, U.S. Trade Chief Catherine Tsai said recently that the U.S. has repeatedly sought and obtained commitments from China only to find that follow-through or real change remains elusive. What do you say to that?
Well, China has a good record of keeping promises. You know, we honor our words with actions. And this year marks the 20th anniversary of China's entry to WTO. So in the past 20 years, China has fulfilled all the commitments of entry. And we have been improving the market economy and you know, putting a sound legal system in place. and we have made great efforts to the IPR protection. So we have a good record of honoring our commitments, and we have differences, but we don't believe tariffs, trade wars are the choice. And the best choice is to have a dialogue and the negotiations to find a mutually acceptable solution based on the principle of mutual respect and mutual accommodation. One side shouldn't impose its own interest and its own thinking on the other side. So we need to talk to each other, to learn from each other, to respect each other. And the tariffs are bad. It hurts China, and it hurt the US. Just give you some figures, The tariff war so far hasn't reduced the trade deficit of the United States. And it cost American household $1,300 US each year since the tariffs were taken into effect. And since 2018, when the tariff war was launched, in the first 3 years, the year 2018, 2019, 2020, so do U.S. export to China, were each year in the 3 years was below the level of the year 2017, the year before the trade war was launched.
Going back further, many American companies, especially small and medium-sized companies, are historically distant from China, may not have family in China, and are not so close to the culture of China, whether it's business or anything else. Do you have? And you've been in the U.S. and you've gotten a chance to meet a lot of different Americans. Any suggestions that you could offer to American companies that are not in China today, doing business in China today, about how to approach the market?
Well, I have met many American small and medium-sized business people. Most of them, they show a great interest in doing business with China. And some of them, they don't know how to do better, right? And I told them that China continues to pursue her opening up policy. Our door won't be shut. Instead, our door, will be kept wider and wider to the rest of the world. Actually, there are many small, medium, and even micro foreign enterprises have already been operating in China. So among all the total foreign companies investing in China, more than 90% are small, medium-sized companies. So China, as I said, will continue to pursue open up policy. It will remain unchanged, and we will do our best to provide a better business environment for them. So I do encourage the small businesses of the United States to look at the future of China's market, which is huge. China has a population of 1.4 billion, and among them, 400 million are mid-incomers. And so this number will be growing. So there will be great opportunities for investors across the world, big or small, and so we welcome. So we welcome them, and we will treat all investors, domestic or foreign, big or small, and we will try our best to provide a level play field for them. And if there's any suggestion I want to give to small businesses, first, stay positive, stay confident in China's huge market. And secondly, to be more careful about China's policies, plannings, and development strategies. They are all open and transparent. They're on Chinese newspapers, they're on Chinese websites. So do some good homework and to find out where the key priority areas are and where the good opportunities lies. And also, they need to get familiar with the Chinese laws and regulations so that they can better adapt to the business environment and the culture even in China and in the Chinese society. And if I want to add something to the Chinese companies investing in the United States, I want to deliver a similar message to them. Although we have lots of challenges and complexities in the China-U.S. relations, but don't lose confidence in the U.S. market, because the China-U.S. economic and trade relations are win-win and resilient. But at the same time, they should be aware of the difficulties and the challenges. And they should get to know more about the U.S. policies, rules, and regulations, and to readjust their businesses so that they could avoid risks. And they should also learn how to use laws to protect their legitimate rights and interests.
One big obstacle to business in the last year, couple of years, has been the reduction in the number of flights between the U.S. and China. So whether you're the CEO and you're going over and looking at a big project that needs parent company support, or whether you're a small businessman looking for a partner or somebody that's going to help you. I think on both sides, the lack of flights has been cited by business people as really an obstacle to commerce. Any hope for improvement in that?
Well, the ongoing pandemic has caused great difficulties to business and travel. We have seen a new round of resurgence in the world, and also we are seeing more outbreaks in China. So the Chinese government puts people's lives and health as a top priority. So we have to take a very strict and resolute measures to counter the spread of the pandemic. So we call it the COVID zero policy. So we work so hard to prevent the import of the virus from abroad. So international flights are getting fewer and fewer, and people traveling are not convenient, even impossible. But it is temporary, and many American companies told me that their motto of being in China is that, in China, for China. So I think it's an important time for foreign companies to stay together with the Chinese people to get through these difficult times. And sooner or later, the COVID will be get relaxed or over. So I hope that traveling will come back. But we fully understand the situation of foreign companies in China. So that's why Chinese governments, at the central level and at local level, they are more closely engaged with foreign companies, listening to their requirements and the difficulties, and they are more responsive.
I have to point to a survey that came out yesterday by the Pew Research Center, which pointed out that a majority of Americans at the moment do have an unfavorable view of China. That's increased a little bit from a year earlier. What did you happen to see that survey, and what do you make of that?
I think the result of that survey failed to give people a whole picture of China-U.S. relations, particularly people-people relations. It's not objective. As I said earlier, so here in the United States, I have met people of different communities. And I went to subnationals and talked to businessmen, farmers, students, teachers, workers. Nobody told me that they don't like China. Most of them told me that they were interested in China. They wish China-U.S. relations well. They wanted to do business with China. They wanted to learn Chinese. They want to go to China. Everybody asks me when the restriction will be lifted. Right? We want to go tomorrow. So the foundation is still there. But if there is something negative, I think this is because of the disinformation, rumors, and even lies fabricated and spread by some anti-China politicians. And they are being played up by some media. But it's not a whole picture.
Okay, well, I hope you can continue to get out and visit different groups in America.
Thank you.
I hope perhaps to see you in New York at some point, and maybe up in Vermont at some point, you never know. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you for coming, and thank you for your questions.